Hi, I'm US Consul General Kathleen Lively. Jazz is a collaborative universe, and we're thrilled to support the Lincoln Center and the Melbourne International Jazz Festival working in concert in every possible way. This masterclass by Christopher Crenshaw from Jazz at the Lincoln Center Orchestra is a real treat. It's not often you can get advice directly from a Tony Award winner. So please, enjoy watching this great US-Australia cultural partnership and masterclass, arranging for a large ensemble with Christopher Crenshaw.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. I can't see you all, but I know that you're there, and we're very happy that you're there. My name's Chelsea Wilson. I'm the Artistic Associate at Melbourne International Jazz Festival, and delighted to welcome you here today to this very special masterclass. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we are digitally meeting upon today, the people of the Kulin Nations, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge any First Nations peoples tuning in today. I'd also like to thank our principal partners, Creative Victoria and the Australia Council, the Vizard Foundation, the RISE Fund, which is an Australian government initiative, the Helen McPherson Smith Trust, and the US Consulate for supporting us in bringing you this incredible masterclass with the wonderful Chris Crenshaw. Chris performs with the Lincoln Center Big Band and is currently on tour, and we are very, very appreciative, Chris, that you have joined us today in amongst a very hectic schedule and on a travel day where you've been traveling for over 8 hours. We really appreciate you taking the time to chat to us about arranging for large ensembles. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Chris, but I want to let you all know that we have a Q&A function and we also have the chat. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask Chris, you can just pop it in the chat. So, over to you, Chris.
All right. Yay, we here and we're live. So thank you everyone for joining, and thanks everyone for participating in whatever way you can in this festival and this Jazz Congress. And I know it's been a long, long wait, and you've been very, very patient, or maybe some of you have been a little bit impatient at times, but that's understandable. We're all human. But we thank you for coming to this session, and we're going to talk a little bit about large ensemble playing, large ensemble writing, just some things to really just think about whenever you want to come up and try to write for a large ensemble. It's very, very involved, but at the same time, it could be very rewarding when you get the final product in. And even though I haven't heard what the MSO and the Vanessa Perica Orchestra did for the opening gala, I saw some reviews and they were very, very enlightening for me. And I want to thank them personally for taking the time and giving me the opportunity to write and do arrangements for them. There's certainly some things that I thought about when I was writing and listening and arranging that I could talk about here on this session. And one of those things was I was talking previously before the webinar started about this being my first opportunity to write for a symphony orchestra. I've written for big band many times, and this was definitely an honor for me to write for the MSO and for the Vanessa Perica Orchestra. And a lot of these ideas that came up for me as I was composing had to do a lot of something that I learned about in math class. I'm not sure if anybody's really taken like a calculus class or an algebra class or a geometry class or anything like that. But one of the things that they always talk about is trial and error. And trial and error is something that you just have to just step in and just get your feet wet and see if anything that you try or anything that you're thinking about in terms of a melody, in terms of the harmony that you want to try, in terms of how you want to stack the melody, how you want to stack the harmony, if you will, works. And some cases it may work, and some cases may not. But it's about actually trying it and seeing what you could come up with. And who knows, that thing might work and then may be able to work in another instance. For example, um, maybe a melody can be played somewhere in the upper register or somewhere in the middle register, but you just have to find out which instrument do you want to play it. And it's up to you to choose, and what your imagination will allow you to choose in order to make that melody stand out, and then a harmony below that. Or you could make the harmony the focal point, and the melody can be something that's like discount, like far off in the distance somewhere, and then that might come up kind of like a story. If you think about storytelling, there's always all these elements. There's a foreground, there's a background, and obviously there's a conclusion. But the foreground and background are always working together. Sometimes the foreground is in. Sometimes the foreground can really be the melody, and the background could be the harmony. And then sometimes it may, either in an instant or gradually, that background can become something that is more present than the foreground used to be. And then that foreground can be used as a motif to carry the piece along, while that background can be used as something like a riff, or it could be used as a vamp, or it could be used as something to further the piece along. But it's up to you to really just choose how you want to make things work. And again, the trial and error is always going to be something that you're always going to think about whenever you're writing arrangements, or especially for a large ensemble, because there's so many things to choose from. And as I was talking with Chelsea, she had a piano in her background, as you can see, and a lot of things can come just from sitting at the piano. Now, I was fortunate enough to be able to arrange at first with the piano, because when I was in school, I was at Valdosta State University, that's down in South Georgia. I was able to use a piano because we had one at our disposal. I was able to, have access to one. But then when I got to the Juilliard School, I didn't have access to a piano all the time. So a lot of things that I came up with in my arrangements, it came from my head, or just the fact that I was already had some facility on the piano. I started playing piano when I was 3 years old, so I had a facility, and knew about the ranges and knew about where, how to play melodies and comp for myself. So coming up with harmonies with the left hand and structuring them for certain instruments, and then using the right hand and using it for certain instruments. And then that development came more and more as I learned about what instruments can be used for what part or what have you. But having that piano is key. And this is something I learned from Rich DeRosa. He was my arranging teacher, my second arranging teacher. My first one was David Berger. He helped me more on the big band side. And Rich DeRosa was a guy that really helped me on the symphonic side, the pedagogic side of it. And if it works on piano, if any idea works on the piano, then it can work anywhere else. And he really made that clear to me when he started demonstrating how certain instruments really start to go together. You kind of get that idea when you start out, or if you happen to be in a concert band setting, if you happen to be in a symphonic band setting, or just a symphony orchestra, or any type of thing that has multiple instruments or multiple families of instruments, you can really start to notice and just be nosy and just start looking around and listening, like what instruments really play together a lot, like French horns and saxophones play together a lot. So I definitely use that to my advantage when I wrote for the Gala, and using the French horn and the saxophone kind of in the same way. I mean, knowing that the French horn is the most versatile instrument in the symphony, as it's both a woodwind and a brass instrument. It can be used in a lot of ways because the range is wide. It has a very wide range, a very wide net to use it as. It could be used as as a fast instrument, a medium tempoed instrument, a slow instrument. It can also be used with the flutes, with clarinets. It could be used with trumpet. It could be used with anything, really. If you trombones, there was something that we did not too long ago for a great jazz guru named Phil Schaap. He passed away not too long ago. You need to look him up. He's like anything, anything that you needed to know about jazz. He knew every single thing. I had him at Juilliard for my second year of jazz history, and this guy knew dates like the back of his hand. Jazz dates, history dates, anything you could think of, and he could describe it to the T. But he was very, very beneficial when I learned about, just learning about the history of jazz. But we played in his honor. We played Moon Dreams from The Birth of the Cool, and it had French horn, it had tuba, and everything. And the French horn part went in and out. Sometimes it would be the harmony underneath the trumpet, or it would be the lead above the trombones, or above the trombone and the alto sax. But the way that I wrote it, I wrote a lot of the horn lines, and the horn was the melodic instrument, and the trombones were underneath it, kind of like the left hand of the piano. So, like I said, if anything works on, if certain lines or certain harmonies work on the piano, then it's a matter of just translating it from the piano to the setting that you want to use. Like, for example, the left hand, like I always refer to the left hand of the piano. Usually that's for the trombones, and sometimes it could be used for the tenor saxophone as well as the baritone in the big band. And in the symphony, the left hand of the piano, in my opinion, the cello, the bass, the bassoon, the bass clarinet, and to a certain degree, the clarinet also in the lower register of the clarinet, the shallow register, is definitely going to be used for the left hand. I'm probably leaving out a few instruments. If I didn't mention tuba, probably the tuba would be probably considered what the left hand, and also the viola to an extent can also be thought about as the left hand of the piano. And also remember that the left hand of the piano can also be used as a melodic part, and then the harmony part could be used up in the right hand of the piano, which is your first viola, first violin, second violin, the upper register of the viola, the oboe, piccolo, flute, trumpet, any treble instrument that you can think of, French horn, the upper register of it, the harp. Even though we didn't use harp in the opening gala, the harp can also be used as the the right hand of the piano. But there are some instances where you try some things, going back to trial and error. There are some instances where you could try things, but then when you hear it back at the recording, then you think, oh man, this didn't work at all. Something's up. What happened? Well, that goes to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is the blend of the instruments. If you know what the blend of the instrument is, then more than likely you can get that mix and match that you want, so you can get that new sound that you want to convey. Because, for instance, in the big band, or maybe a small group in a jazz band, the trumpet, to me, the trumpet and the alto saxophone are two instruments that really, really love to fight each other, in my opinion. If you go back and listen to anything by Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, or even Ornette Coleman and Don Cherry, or any of those groups that have the alto and trumpet in it, Art Farmer and Jackie McLean ring a bell also. But you notice that there are overtones just fighting each other, and there's like a whistle sound that's like a third voice to me, especially when they play in the upper register together, because the B, because the trumpet is a B flat instrument. The alto saxophone is an E flat instrument. So even though they're playing the same concert notes, they're not playing in the same overtone series. And then that causes that kind of clash when you get to certain pitches. And certain pitches really don't kind of line up, but I kind of like that in a way, because like I said, it creates a third voice. It's almost like a whistling tone up above that octave. You have to listen really, really closely for certain notes. And so I like to use that from time to time when I write. Other instruments that really work well together are obviously flutes and clarinets. And sometimes you need the clarinet to be underneath the flute or piccolo, so to speak, to create the strength in the octave. If you keep them in octaves, the clarinet can really strengthen that flute. And especially because the flute is, to me, it's more of an opaque instrument. If you think about instruments as fabric, the flute slash piccolo is very, very opaque, very transparent, very, very see-through. So it probably would take two of them to equal one instrument, in my opinion. The clarinet's a little bit thicker in texture, especially in the lower register, the shallow register. The throat tones, not so much, and then the clarion register with all the, the altissimo past the break. All of those notes speak very, very clearly. And you want to really, really know a lot about the instruments that you're working with and what they can do. Like the tenor saxophone, I spoke about versatility with the French horn in the symphony. In the big band, I think the tenor saxophone is the most versatile wind instrument, simply because the range covers a low concert A flat all the way up to wherever its altissimo range can be, and that depends on the individual playing the instrument, which is another thing. Know your personnel. If you have somebody that can play in that register or play something very, very well, use that to your advantage when you're writing for whatever ensemble you want to write for. But the tenor saxophone, I tend to, when I use 3-part harmony, especially if I'm writing for a sextet, think about something like Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, or the Jazz Tet with Art Farmer, Benny Golson, and Curtis Fuller, or any 3-piece group, or any 3-part harmony that you want to have, like a trumpet, trombone, tenor saxophone, front line. I usually put the tenor saxophone on the bottom as the bottom voice, instead of, sometimes you would have trumpet, then the tenor saxophone, and then the trombone would be the bottom voice. But I like to put the tenor saxophone on the bottom. That's something I got from Jimmy Heath and Benny Golson, specifically because their voice, going back to fabric and going back to texture, their voice is very, very thick and very, very present on the bottom of the horn. Whereas for trombone, our strongest part of the horn is the middle C and up, like da, da, all of that and on up. That's our strongest part, and the same can hold true for the trumpet as well. Just take an octave higher, and that part of the horn is stronger than the lower register of the trombone, lowest register of any brass instrument, really. And get the complete opposite, where the tenor saxophone is strong in virtually all parts. The altissimo register, just again, it depends on the player, but the lower register of the horn, with all the honks that they can get out, and even playing with the subtones, even playing subtones on the saxophone, even though they're soft, they can still be strong and present, especially if you need to be playing something very, very soft. So really knowing the texture and the blends of each instrument that can work, like the tenor saxophone and the trombone can work well together in the big band. The trumpet and flute can work well together in the big band. If you happen to use a double, like a clarinet or even a soprano saxophone, those can work well together. But most of the time, when you try to play in harmony, most of the time you want to try to keep the woodwind instruments together, playing in unison or playing in octaves. There are only a very few times where the woodwinds would work well together in harmony. It just depends on how you stack them. Like if it's close harmony, like a close position, 1-3-5, then most of the time it's not really gonna have a strong blend if you try to put them in harmony. Whereas the brass, if you do it, you can have good harmony with the brass. But if you probably stack the harmony and spread it some sort of way, like 5 at the top, one in the middle, and 3 at the bottom, sort of way. So you get like a or okay, y'all got that? So some sort of way you could get that kind of stack, and it wouldn't be so harsh, so to speak, with the woodwinds. But again, it goes back to trial and error. So if it can work, if you can make it work, if you have the people that can make that work, then it can, you can really get a really good blend and a really good moment happening. And don't be afraid to use the piano and the guitar together to play along with especially with strings, and with especially with the violins, and with piccolo, with oboe, with any of the higher instruments. Don't be afraid to use piano, and don't be afraid to use guitar either, because using the piano can also give you like a percussive element. When you especially want to have something to really sparkle, you can really use the piano to your advantage to help not only get the sparkle, but to reinforce the melody that you're trying to get, or the groove that you're trying to get. If you happen to have something kind of like what I did with Wee Baby Blues, I used something to an effect that kind of had like a work song kind of vibe with it, but I used the clarinets and the piccolos to really get that feel that I wanted. It was kind of a long, short, long, short, long, short figure. Kind of give it like an attitude, so I could give it the attitude that I needed to have with the blues. And so that was something that I like to use there, and I can't wait to hear what it sounds like, if it came off pretty well or not. But I mean, we'll see. I still have yet to listen to it, but yeah, trial and error, blends of instruments and texture. We can go all day really with all of that. With the basses and cellos also definitely work well together, even though they're tuned differently. Cellos being tuned in fifths and basses being tuned in fourths. Both of those could really be used well together, and with those instruments, they could be used like a thumb line. A thumb line is something that is played on the piano. If you think about Thelonious Monk's "Well You Need It," do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do-do-do, playing that with the left hand, do-do-do-do-do-do-do, here's the right hand, do-do-do-do-do-do-do. You got this counter melody that could be used as a thumb line. So I play it with my thumb. Boom, 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 boom. It's real simple, boom. But I'm just moving it ever so slightly up the chromatic scale and back down and back up again. But it's just something that kind of keep the cohesion and keep the piece moving forward. It's a thumb line, and that could be used with the trombones. That could be used with baritones. That could be used baritone saxophone. I mean, that could be used with the cello, the bass, any of the lower instruments. The bassoon is really a good instrument that could be used in that way. And don't be afraid to take chances with any of the lower instruments with melodies. That could be something that could be used to your advantage as well. If you think about using the lower instruments as a melody, and then you could probably voice everything else up high in terms of harmony. And that's another thing that you want to try to think about, is keeping things simple. You're going to try to have at least one melody, or maybe a counter melody, and then have your harmony somewhere. Whether it's high, whether it's low, or whether it's medium, try to have polar opposites. If something is if the melody is high, then the harmony most of the time is going to be either medium or low. If the melody is low, then most of the time the harmonies are going to be high, and just depends on what you want in the situation. Um, I can recall that didn't get played, but that was an arrangement that I did of Avalon. I put the melody in one part of it. I put the melody on the in the low. I think it was trombones. I think trombones had the melody, and then I had some sort of counter melody above that with the strings, basically the violin and viola, and then the piccolos, clarinets, not necessarily trumpets. I think trumpets kind of joined in a little bit later at the end with the melody, but they had this line that went on for days and days and days, and it had like the intervallic things, and it was based on arpeggios and based on like going between arpeggios and melodic lines, but it was still a counter melody to the melody. The melody was slower in rhythm. Boom, 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 boom. So that was really, really slow. But then the counter melody was like so it was a lot faster and a lot more involved, almost to the point where it could have been a focal point, talking about foreground and background again. But the melody was being played in the trombones and the tubas and the I want to say bass clarinet, bassoon, low brass, low winds, that it would have been strong enough to cut through all of the higher winds. So that's again something I tried, and I believe I've tried it many times, and it's worked before. So you kept it in your bag. You keep something like that in your bag and just use it. Now you're using it at a bigger scale, so you believe that it works in a bigger scale. So always have to sell your product, whatever it is that you're gonna write. You have to believe in what you write, and believe that it is gonna be right. Or if you come across it like maybe it might work, maybe it might not work. You have to sell your product, because it's ultimately, even though it's someone else's piece or maybe it's your own piece, it's your vision. It's the way that you want to write it, and it's the way that you see it, the way that you hear it, and convey it out to the world, because the world is going to hear this at some point or see it at some point. So if you don't sell it, then it's null and void up to a certain point. Then you have to go back to the drawing board. It's like, okay, how can I fix this? How can I fix this this thing? Well, it's like, well, okay, so maybe something might sound a little strange here. Like if you use a harp, for instance, going back to blends and going back to texture and going back to knowing what the instrument can do. I remember trying something when I was at the Juilliard School. I tried to write something for the harp, and I really wasn't too familiar with what the harp's range and how each part of the range sounds, going back to how the tenor saxophone sounds in the lower register compared to the upper register, or how the trombone sound in the upper register compared to the lower register. I didn't realize that putting the harp in the upper register would make the sound very, very brittle. Like the sound would kind of like, if you touch something, it would break off, and so it would have that kind of a texture to it. And so I realized that, hey, if I want to make this line work, I have to put it in the lower octave. And by putting it in the lower octave, it came out a lot stronger, because putting things putting lines and melodies up in the upper register for the harp, like I said, the sound would decay a whole lot sooner. The pitch of it, the intonation of it would be just a little off, either way, either sharp or flat, and you can't really disguise it. But putting it back into the say middle C and the next octave up, probably halfway through the next octave up, would probably work for the harp, making things makes sense, so to speak. Probably for lower winds, if you try to um, put chords down, if you think about a piano, you have middle C, boom, and then you have boom, and you have the octave below that. Um, Probably halfway through, or maybe to a D, maybe to the E before the next C coming down is probably the area that you want to use from that E 2 octaves below middle C and up to middle C, and even up above that, probably halfway through at F sharp. Boom, boom. Probably use that much of it to use as your left hand to try to make things work. Or I just contradicted myself. Boom, boom. So the next octave down. So the next octave down from middle C, but moving up to like around D, E flat, and E. Boom, 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 boom. Probably from that D and on up, it's probably your best bet to be able to use left hand chords. Um, just to spell out chords, however you want to spell them, or whatever version you want to use, or spread that you want to use, voicing. That's your best bet in order to make chords make sense. And obviously below that, that's where you could use for your bass lines. But that particular range from D below middle C and just up to probably E above middle C and F above middle C is probably your best bet to use for your range to really make your harmonies work. And really, because otherwise, if you try to go any lower than that, then it's just going to sound like mud, and your chords won't really make sense. The only person that I know that can really make those chords make sense, but I think it's the spread that he uses, is Bobby Timmons. He played piano with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, and he also played with Cannonball Adderley, and he also led his own trio. Cat came up in late 50s, early 60s. So you get a chance to listen to him play Dat Dead This Here. Those are 2 tunes that he did, and that's an idea of what I was talking about with the. It's below the range that I spoke about a lot of times when he comps, but that's like the only time it really makes sense to do that or comp like that. But then you got your middle range of the piano, which you want to really just think about. Really, any range, any part of the piano can really work for the melody. It just depends. But just putting it through its instruments and knowing the range of the instruments. If you want to put something down that's too low, or something that's probably unplayable, for instance, for trombones, we don't like going from B flat in first position, boom, to B natural in 7th position, boom, boom. So if we see that, then the trombone players are going to get mad at you. And clarinets will get mad at you if you put those same notes, B flat and B natural, together, or some sort of way they come up in a line and they go down up above the break, that dreaded break that they always, fear, especially first-time clarinet players. They still working on working on trying to cross that break and make it as comfortable as they can make it, but it can it can make or break a situation, especially if they learn something on the fly. So try to know as much about the instruments that you're dealing with, what it can do, what it cannot do, what notes work, what notes don't work. In terms of the overtone series for each of the instruments, especially brass instruments, some notes are in tune and more in tune than others. Find out that stuff. Be very, very nosy in that regard. Just try something and say, hey, or just ask around. It's like, hey, can y'all play this, or can you play this for me? Or can you play this in a mute, or could you use this and you play this softly, or like, can you play a high C on trumpet very, very soft? They're gonna tell you no, but it doesn't hurt to try. Doesn't hurt to try to pick their brain a little bit to find out what you can about each instrument that you're dealing with, and especially since we're talking about large ensemble, you got a lot to choose from. So just pick brains, pick the brains, ask questions, ask what what works on this instrument, what makes this instrument so difficult. Why does the bassoon have to use their thumb for about 13 notes, 13 different notes, or something like that? What makes each instrument click? What makes each instrument difficult? What makes each instrument rewarding to play? And one more thing I wanted to point out before I open things up for questions is I've been talking about woodwind instruments, brass instruments. I hadn't really been talking about percussion a whole lot. I didn't have percussion on this time for the MSO, but one thing that we always stress in band is everybody is a drummer. Everybody has a percussion bone in their body, whether they want to or not. So when you're writing for a big group, you want to establish a groove within those wind or string instruments. I know a lot of times when I wrote for the MSO, I incorporated some sort of groove inside so they can keep time within themselves, so they wouldn't have to really rely on the drums, the drum set, so to speak, to help them with the time. I remember on Almost Being in Love, boom, boom, boom. That's the bass line. Boom, 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 boom. Real simple, right? And then I had something a little bit more complicated with the melody at the time, and it's still the intro of the song before the vocalist comes in with the verse. But at the beginning, I established the groove. So that could give whoever was playing the I think it was the strings, and again going back to the upper winds, they had this line, and it had 16th notes in it, but there was 16th notes within the groove that I had, and that part was probably in the guitar and I forget who else I wrote it for, but I know definitely I wrote it in for the guitar to play that groove. So there were not only quarter notes that you could deal with, there were eighth notes you could deal with, and then there were 16th notes that you could deal with inside the groove. So if you want to put a figure, a rhythmic figure that anyone else can hold on to without without the drums, then so be it. You could try that. And so if you're working on a piece and you don't have drums in there, it's like, oh, well, we got the time right here, so you can hold on to this. Like, okay, let's hold on to that and just let's play off of it, because everybody needs some sort of subdivision to keep the flow going in the piece. And so if you can establish a groove inside with the winds or with the strings, then I think that would make the piece, give it more forward direction when you do that. We could talk about intervals, using different intervals to your advantage, the tritones, the thirds, the octaves. I mentioned octaves a lot, and octaves and unisons, and then inside that, all those people have to figure out who are we following. Even if it's a unison line, we have to follow somebody. That's in the playing aspect of it. But if you know somebody who can lead it really well, you can just give that line and give the stylings to the lead, to the person who you think should lead it, and then they'll soon be able to follow that, and that makes the piece even better. So using octaves, using unisons, using fourths and fifths, how you would use those. Thirds and sixths really work well together. Kind of the voice leading and the motion, the different motions, the oblique motion, the parallel motion, even though parallel fifths are really frowned upon in classical music and back Baroque period, classical period, Gregorian chant period, parallel fifths for all y'all, no parallel fifths. But after that, the rules were been broken. A lot of rules were broken to make music a little bit more fun to do. But thirds and sixths, fourths and fifths, seconds and sevenths, just find out how they can work together If you hear something that intrigues you, try it, figure out what it is, put it into whatever it is that you want to write, and see if it works or not. There are a lot of ones. I remember Thelonious Monk always had like he played, let me think, it's a B flat chord, but he had the B flat, which is the root, and then he had like an A. Actually, I take that back. That's the typical major seventh voicing. Boom, boom. So he would flip that, and he would have the major seventh on the bottom, and he had the root on the top. Bang! So it's like an octave and basically a minor ninth. Instead of he would have that going on, and that can make for an interesting use of harmony, or interesting use of an interval. So you can pretty much put anything that you want to put together, but it's just a matter of you just organizing it in a way and making things work for you and making things work for that arrangement. So I hope these tips have been helpful for you. I know I kind of went a little bit all over the place, but I hope you got something out of what I talked about with trial and error, with the blends of the instruments and texture, establishing a groove within the wind or string instruments to help out and enhance what the percussion is doing, importance of intervals and how to use them. If it works on the piano, it works everywhere else. And one more thing, start small, keep things simple, and then just grow up as you make things better as you progress. If you're not really up to writing for a large ensemble, start with a small ensemble. That's what Horace Silver did. I think he's the master of two-part harmony. So if you start with two-part harmony, then graduate to 3, graduate to 4, and then you can also graduate to 5 eventually, and sometimes even 6. Just depends on what you want. But it's just a graduation of things, and just listening to things that have 2-part harmony, 3-part harmony, 4-part harmony, and then just using that inside of whatever context that you want to use, whether it's a sextet, nonet, octet, and then eventually that grows into a big band, because you can use 5 instruments, 4 instruments. You can use all the instruments, and you can use cross-section writing, which is something I stressed about earlier with the trombone tenor going together, baritone and trumpet going together, oboe. Think about oboe and viola together. Think about that, and along with the piano being used in there to enhance the melody. So start small and just keep growing and keep trying new things. I got a question here from Vanessa Perica. Thanks for joining the class, and I was very, very honored for you to play my arrangements, and I heard that you had a few arrangements in there as well, and they came off very well. And so you had a question. It was wonderful to hear your music last week. I was wondering what big band records you love. Who are you influenced by? Duke Ellington is somebody that I was influenced by. David Berger, who was my first arranging teacher at Juilliard. David Springfield was my teacher before then at Valdosta State, but he helped me to Slide Hampton and a lot of what he did as an arranger. Wayne Shorter was one of my favorite arrangers, so you go back to the Art Blakey records that he did, Slide Hampton, and all the records that he did without piano per se. So there was a lot of things in there that he did. But Duke Ellington was one of my favorites. I remember riding down to Thomasville, Georgia, which is about 2 hours, about an hour and a half away from Valdosta. I remember riding there, and Masterpieces of Ellington was playing. The band director took me there, jazz band director. He took me there, and he let me hear Masterpieces of Ellington. So that had Mood Indigo, that 15-minute version of Mood Indigo, and I think that kind of spearheaded me in terms of big bands, Obviously, Count Basie, what he does with Ernie Wilkins. Um, what's my man's name? Eddie Durham, um, Bill Russo from the Stan Kenton band. Bill Holman is another good arrangement. So great arranger and composer in his own right. So many others I can can think of. But Duke Ellington was my guy. Duke Ellington was my guy. He had so much blend with all the instruments and the way that he and Billy Strayhorn worked together just to make some of these awesome sounds. Obviously, there's a lot more people that I can think of. Maria Schneider comes to mind with the uniqueness that she has in her band. John Clayton is another guy that I love to check out. I remember he did this version of Emily that he and Jeff Clayton played together, and it was so moving and so touching. So that's one. That's one guy that I like to check out sometimes. Let's see. Hi, Chris. Thanks for a great session that linked in your work. Hopefully, we'll have an edit not too soon in the future. That comes from Matt Hoy. We went back and forth so much on email, getting these arrangements to him and, correcting them on finale and sending PDFs and things and making sure that everybody had their pieces together. So I thank Matt for all of that. I thank him for him and Hadley for chatting with me and giving me the opportunity to make things work. I hope everything was worth your while. I can't wait to hear the final result. And I know the festival is underway, and so many things going on in Melbourne. So a lot of excitement in the air with all the pandemic is hopefully at some point coming to some kind of end, so we can have some normalcy down there. I know Christmas is coming up, so be encouraged, stay encouraged with everything that's going on down there. I wish y'all all the best. Andrew Murray has a question. Hi, Chris. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. I was wondering, when you're writing for an ensemble for the first time, a symphony orchestra, is your feedback for your trial and error attempts on whether it works just the gig, recording of the gig, or do you have ways to check it prior to the gig, assuming there are no rehearsals? Thank you. Sometimes I can just look in the score sometimes, and I can just check and see if I have all my I's dotted or my my T's crossed. But then there's some instances where I listen. Really, listening is your best answer, because you got it right there. You can really hear. You can hear something if it doesn't really sound all that hot, and then you can see what you did, or you can hear what happened and then try to change something. It could be like one thing, and it could make a really, really big difference. And then try it again and just have them, play what you changed and see if that works. Or you can even do it inside of rehearsal if you get a chance. Now, if it's on the gig, then hey, it's on the gig there forever. But if you make a second version of it, then you can go back and you can change something that you may not have liked. I mean, we always changing things in the JLCO all the time. I mean, just on this big band tour alone, I know our tenor saxophone player, Victor Goins, has done another version of a tune that we've played like many, many times. But he's always looking to change at least one small little detail to make things a little better for a section, or make it something better for a whole part of a piece. But we always go back and we always we change things if we don't really find it to our liking. But sometimes too much change can be a bad thing. But it's just it goes back to what you hear and what you think and what you want to sell. So that's a good question, Andrew. It's a really good question. Well, I hope things are going to be going well for this. Oh, okay. Got another question from I'm wondering how you work with clients. This is from Chelsea that commission you to write arrangements. How do you often check in with them that you are on the right track? Do you create project timelines to check in with them about their progress? Um, this time I didn't really check in a lot because of the I started getting a lot busier, but with Matt and Hadley really coming in and checking in, it's like they would give me emails on like, hey, well, this score is too small, or maybe we have to change a key or something. But I really didn't get a lot of feedback. So if I don't get a lot of feedback from the people that I work with, then that means I just assume that they are on the right track and they're not having really a lot of problems with the piece. But if there are chances where I can check in and just to see how things are going, then yeah, I can. And then if I'm able to give feedback, then I do. But we were able to get like MIDI recordings of a lot of the arrangements that I did, and have a basis for them to work off. But ultimately, they're gonna have an interpretation of the piece, and the way that they do it, it might not be. It may be a way that I'm thinking about it. It may not be, but it's out there. And that's what counts.
Hmm. Thanks, Chris. I'm just going to talk because I can actually do that. I feel bad for the other participants who can't do that. Um, but I'm just also wondering if you can speak to kind of the business side around this a little bit, and in regards also to copyright and future licensing of arrangements. Do you have any advice? Say if somebody has been approached or commissioned to write arrangements for a particular show, should they send an agreement where they request that in future they're always attributed, or they can only use it for a one-off licensing fee? How do you kind of tackle that side of it? And what happens with royalties and copyright and things like that?
Well, more so with I'm more familiar with the original side of it. With the arrangement, it can get really, really tricky, especially if the person happens to be alive. The licensing thing and everything, it can really hang people up. So it's like you want to have your ducks in a row when you're dealing with that. Or if you have somebody like like in the JLCO, we have somebody that works on that side of it for us to really get that together. But it's also good to really just know what you're doing in terms of getting the arrangements and getting the licensing and getting the working out the fees, working out if it's a one-time thing. You really want to try to get that all in the first when you're talking and negotiating and getting all of that together. Because one little slip up can result in like either a one-time thing, or it could be like a Bobby Bonilla thing where they're paying you for like 25 years. Or you're paying them for 25 years.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, and it's that stuff's really tricky as well. And because, as an arranger, if you're also an artist, you might have a manager and an agent that looks after you. But a lot of people that do arranging, in my experience, are self-managed,
yeah,
and I guess it's just something we need to be really careful about.
exactly. Sometimes a lot of times either the arranger or the person's stuff that you're arranging, a lot of the royalties go to not royalties, but a lot of the goes to like an estate. So you have to really be careful about how you set that up, or how you talk and get that together. And it's just like I said, just have all your ducks in a row when you negotiating and things like
Mhm.
that, because you want your arrangement to be out there and you want to honor this person, but you want to do it the right way ultimately.
Are
Cool.
there any other questions?
Don't be shy.
Okay, well, maybe I'll just go and ask another question.
Cool.
Do you have any, advice or thoughts around arranging pieces with singers in mind, as opposed to instrumental pieces, and any advice on working with singers?
Yeah, you want to cater to them, especially with keys. I tried to pick keys that one would work for, like some pieces would work better for wind instruments. Some pieces work better with string instruments, like in terms of keys, E's, the open strings, the E's, the A's, the D's, the G's, the C's, and all those, and then of course the wind keys, the B flats, the E flats, the F's, that occasional A flats here and there. But with singers, you have to be very, very cognizant because I work with singers all the time when I played in church, and you have to be ready for every key. Any key is game. So you really have to be ready for it and be very, very comfortable in those keys. And so the occasional G flats and F/F sharps, occasional B's, the occasional what are some other keys? A that pop up for singers. So I tried to write around that range just to and I think I only had one problem where they had to change the key from D flat to B flat. And so I think I did pretty good with choosing keys for the singers, and having being a singer myself, I just had to like, okay, I'm not writing for me, I'm writing for somebody else, and so I had to really just like key in and like, okay, what key would be good for this, and like, okay, I'll choose D for that, and then I'll try to choose C for this, or I'll try to choose E flat for this one, or F for this one, or B flat, or whatever I'm thinking about. But keys can be keys can have a mood sometimes.
Mm.
You can really set a mood with whatever key that you do things in. Yeah.
Of course, I had to ask that question being a singer.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, we will do things with singers all the time. We have a singer on the road with us, so like you said, we always have to cater to singers and just make sure they're comfortable. Because if they're not comfortable, then the song isn't really gonna go anywhere. Especially if they kind of singing out of range, or they have to scream through the song. It's like, no, we don't want them to scream through the song. We want them to be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, very important. Yeah, that's great advice.
yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining Melbourne International Jazz Festival Congress. We're kicking off tomorrow with huge panels back to back at Melbourne Recital Centre, so looking forward to seeing a lot of you face to face tomorrow. But this was just an incredible way to kick off the MIJF Congress. So yes, a huge thanks again to Chris, and a digital clap from everyone. I hope the rest of your tour is incredible.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. We're in Birmingham, Alabama right now, hitting up a few places in Florida, going back up to my home state, um, past a little bit of South Carolina and then back home, and then we finish up in New York. And I think one of the shows, I think Wednesday night show, and maybe Sunday afternoons show, which would probably be Wednesday night would be Thursday. Let's see, 8 o'clock. That would be midnight for
Mhm.
y'all. And Sunday around 2, that would be 6 in the morning. So that means I had to wake up pretty early for that. But either way, you got 5 shows in New York. I think one or two of them are going to be live streamed. So check out
Fantastic.
jazz.org if you feel free. I think around December 15th through the 19th are going to be those shows. So be on the lookout to see which one of them is. And I think they might be on demand too after the first night. So they'll be around for a while, probably until Christmas
Yeah, great.
and
Can't wait for
holidays.
those ones. Yeah, I love that. I love that series. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, thanks again, everyone. Thanks so much. And we'll see you at Congress, and all the best, Chris.
All right. Good luck to the rest of the festival. And y'all have a good time now.